I think I'll start with family of origin. My story, our story, the Magle, Gaybauer, Nussdorfer, journey is different than what I've heard from others in this room. I want to say that I see myself as being part of a very privileged generation. We have it's almost, it's often said about baby boomers. We had unparalleled material wealth, opportunities for education, all that. So when I bring up these things about my family, it is with deep gratitude, because I know I can see their lives and see how it comes out in my life. But I would just like to kind of start out with a little picture. There is a scene in one of our favorite movies, Scrooged, with Bill Murray, and he is 4 years old, and he's watching TV, and his mother is back in this kind of dimly lit room. She's smoking a cigarette, and she's large with child, and a dad who is giving him, a 4-year-old, 5 pounds of veal and thinking he's giving him a really good birthday present, when what he wanted was a choo-choo train. And the whole thing, like, well, you worked hard for that. That describes some of what we had, as I was just, it was not a nice, anyway. We had my great grandmother Wilhelmina Gerke Magle came here in the late 19th century at age 14 or 15. She was, I think, a mail order bride. I'm not sure, but she was the second wife of Gottlieb Magle. His first wife had died. I don't know how many children his first wife had by him, but Mina, great grandma Mina, raised, I think, 11 children. And my grandfather, Reinhardt, was the next to last one. He had a younger sister, but he was one of the babies. And I didn't hear it directly from his mouth, but a couple of things I know about or heard about Mina is that she loved to knit. She knitted all the time. She would take her knitting to church. And I think there's some DNA going on. And my father's early memories, when he was about 4 or 5 years old, that he spent much time with me, because he was one of the younger children in his family. But he would do carding of wool, and he complained that it was dirty. And I figured it was raw wool with all the lanolin and scum on it, and he would card that so that she could spin it into yarn and I think make socks. And what do I usually make? Socks, but so there's that. But the story that was attributed to my grandfather Reinhardt was that he was awakened. They were in a small farmhouse in Door County, Wisconsin, in rural Door County, and that was the homestead. And the kids slept upstairs in a loft kind of thing. And he was awakened by a very loud noise that Mina had taken a frying pan and whacked Gottlieb over the head because he came home drunk. Cast iron, yeah. So, and further on, my sister likes to dabble in genealogy. There is a small village in northwestern Switzerland called Bipp, Oberbipp. And there was a BIP, Oberbipp, above the Bipp. And there was a castle, or Schloss, as they said in German, in Oberbipp. that had been there since the 11th century, 11th or 12th century, thousands or 1100s. And that was inhabited by princes and people or administrators from the Austrian Empire. So it was at the time of Napoleon, there was a big uprising all over Europe that was anti-royal in character. And the Castle Bip was trashed in the early 1800s, 1805, I think, 1803, by villagers in this village. We don't know who was there, but I can see my forebears taking their pitchforks and smashing the windows, and they trashed it so they had to be completely redone. It still stands, but it has a story. So that's my DNA. How to say this? I grew up and there was tension in my home. My parents were both farmers. My mother was brought up by a tenant farmer. This was during the Depression. She was, there's stories of skeletons on both sides. Let's just say that. My mother just didn't feel comfortable around my father, and that was evident from a very young age for me. And I was the oldest child, and I felt responsible, as youngest children do. You feel responsible that, if there's a problem, you're at fault. My mother, as she got older, I don't know if she would be labeled as autism spectrum disorder or neurodivergent, or but she had more symptoms as she aged. My dad, being a farm boy that he was, and he worked as a mechanic, he never had psychology classes or anything like that. So, but he had very fixed ideas of what your wife should do. Your wife was the mother was responsible for the children. He never spanked us, or maybe once, but my mother was responsible for all that. But anyway, happier he wasn't around, and I think it was because my mother was happier. And I grew up not being there were years I wouldn't even talk to my father as I became a teenager. Most of my middle school years and high school year, I just avoided him, and I did what I thought was expected of me, and that got healed later on. But at the time, it was one of those things that we lived in a home that was kind of we're isolated. They grew up isolated, so the family was the center, and so we didn't I say I didn't go to camp. I mean, that was just my church experience was being trucked picked up on Sundays, the Sunday school of various places, mostly the Christian Reformed, but I didn't behave well enough for them, but they stopped doing that. But the Methodists as I got older, and so I had some good experience. I'll get back to that, but there was an incident coming into why it was asked, why did you just choose to become a doctor? My sister was, wait, hold on 1 minute. So siblings, you have the one sister, any other siblings? Two more sister and a brother who came along 10 and 12 years later. Okay. And my mother got those pregnancies did not go well. And we were responsible for running the house. Okay. From the time I was 10 years old, we saw ourselves as running the house. My mother would direct us from her bed, but it was one of those things that seemed to yeah, didn't go well for her. My sister did get ill. And well, I think the second pregnancy didn't go well for my mother because my sister got very ill. She was about 6 weeks, 2 months old. And I remember I was not quite 2 years old at the time, but it's a pre-verbal memory, but I remember the anxiety and of my parents because my sister she was vomiting and she had a quality of her cry, which to this day I can recognize as being a symptom of hypernatremic dehydration, which is a pretty technical term. I didn't know that at that time, but as I went to medical school, I found out what it was. And I had heard it a handful of times in my career. But what that cry did to me inside as a very small child is that I'll be good. I'll be good. I'll help. I'll help. And we know that young children, Daniel, we know that young children want to help their parents. And my mother says anecdotes about how I would do things to be helpful. For one thing, they had to take Barb to the hospital, and she was in the hospital for some time. And I was spending a lot of that time with some neighbors, and they said, "Oh, you were just like a little, angel, a little angel, but that kind of feeling would come over me. And as I got older, I really got into this medical book that my parents had. It had a illustration. It had the kind of a celluloid that you can peel back, and it showed a pregnancy, a cross section of a woman. This sounds horrible, but a cross section with a full term pregnancy. And I would just look at it. I don't know where that book is. It's been lost. Things like that, books and things like that just didn't get saved in my family, unlike my husband's family. But anyway, I remember that, and I feel that feeling of responsibility. And I wanted to become, as I got older, I wanted to become educated, competent, and able to support myself. Oh yeah, I was kind of nerdy, and I knew I wasn't going to get married from my looks or my charm. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to support myself. And I don't want to just take orders from men. And so I decided I'm going to go for it. And I think I was about 9 or 10 at the time. I just going to go step by step and see where this takes me. And I love science. I love science and biology. And I had an ornery streak. I'll say probably. And is that oh yeah. I'll get to this other stuff here in a bit. Anything else? Should I go on? Go on. Okay. Well, I'm going to go on to my heroes. Because, well, for one thing, a lot of them are here, right now. Because I don't see heroes as Wonder Woman, I just, people that, kick butt. I see people who take on life's problems and vicissitudes. It was told to me one of my heroes, who happens to be here today, the vicissitudes of life, and figure out how to handle them as best they can. And when I was really young, there was an older girl in my school. Her name was Paula Becker, and Paula Becker I was in 3rd grade, she was in 5th grade, and she took piano lessons, and she got to play in front of the whole school. Mm-hmm. So I wanted piano lessons, and I got piano lessons, and they cost my parents a half an hour for $1. I would walk the mile up to Dutton, up to her home. She was an older lady, and I would walk there too. And I fell in love with making noise on an instrument. But she was the first that I wanted to do what she did. I had a group of teachers. The most obvious one to me was my chemistry teacher in high school. And there were others as well, I think, who wanted to make sure that of course, I told these people in my little rural school in Caledonia that I wanted to be a doctor, and they go, people don't even go to college in this from this school, much less this. But anyway, I got opportunities, and they made sure that I was in the library at Hope College when I was a freshman in high school. I was 13 at the time, and I saw Dr. Christian Barnard, the surgeon who did the first heart transplant. I can't say that I was really wanting to be like him. I thought he talked weird, and I didn't understand what he was talking about. But anyway, I got that opportunity that not everyone had. And looking back, I knew there were people who were trying to help me. And then as a freshman at Michigan, I was able to go to a lecture by Jane Goodall as hairstyle who changed biology by just writing and testifying to what she saw. She saw animals other than humans using tools. And she just said it. Of course, she had some backing of some pretty powerful people, but she was able to do that, and that really resonated. There was a fellow student in my chemistry class, Sue Singer, who was Jewish, and she was in my house that I ended up being in Ann Arbor, and when I went to college. And her father was a physician in Albany, who taught at Albany Medical College, and she was only at Michigan for a couple of years, but she was going to go back and go to medical school where her dad taught. But she says, "Hey, I've got everything behind me, Mags. You don't have everything. You don't have the opportunities. I'm going to help you." And she did. We studied together. She helped me rub off some of my rougher countrified naivete, and so she disappeared from my life. She actually had a lot of project people, and there's several of us who graduated lived in Henderson and graduated from Michigan, who want to find her, and we can't find her. She is a physician. She did become a family practice physician and taught a lot. And I'm told that she continued to have a lot of people she mentored. And so she's kind of and I had my organic chemistry professor was one that really looked up to. A pediatrics professor named Dr. Patricia O'Connor was the first one to call me a doctor. I'm third year medical school. Unknown community lady in Kalamazoo. I was at a family practice preceptorship, and I can't even remember her name, but I sat down for coffee with her, and she was going to give me a lecture that she gave I don't know if she gave it to all of the medical students that came through that town, but she told me, you know what you know, and you've got to be true to what you know. And I took that to be a true witness of my faith and trust myself, which is a big thing for me. And then I get into Lamoni, and I at one time had listed about 10 people, and it was growing. But Myrna Logan, Kay Blair, and Kathy Bergman, they mothered me when I first moved here. I was a young mother. They worked at the Graceland Health Service. I put down the Barbaras. Barbara Lee, Barbara Bashirs, and Barbara McKernan, because these are all people that I look up to for gentleness, for competence, anyway. But I want to end that, and I'm really rambling. You're doing wonderful. Later on in my practice, I had and you probably would know who this is because you're all were in a small town, but an older woman she was a farm woman, I believe. She became one of my patients. Very gentle, very soft-spoken, very appreciative of everything. Just I mean, the kind of person you want as your patient, And as she aged, she became more and more demented. And there was a variety of medical problems that went on as well. But part of her dementia was just a severe, horrible fear. A horrible fear. And I felt so bad for you. You want to give her a medicine that helps to dull it, or help her. But her family, who I also got to know, told me that she was severely abused as a child, severely. And she was probably, as people who are demented, they start to live in their past. These were painful memories. They were very painful and frightening, very frightening. And she remembered the fear. In her dying time, she would cry out, and her children came and would hold her hand and say, "We are here. We love you. You are safe." And it was her daughter and her son both did that. And I got to thinking about that, because that was better than any medicine I could, better than Haldol, better than Valium. And I thought, you have won. You have a legacy of love, and you came from a legacy of pain, and you switched it around. She is my hero more than Wonder Woman or those kick butt superheroes you see on TV. And I have some, but I'm always having a place that's inconvenient. But anyway, that was one of my heroes. And I guess that brings up my journey of faith. I learned how to play piano well enough to play for a church service at the Caledonia Methodist Church when I was in high school. And I was just very, thank you. And first I did the pre-Sunday school worship, and then I did the full 11 o'clock service a couple of times. I was so proud of myself. There was a Sunday school teacher we had at Methodist Church. He's still alive, I think. Name was John DeVries, and he was a lay minister, and he would challenge us in this high school. We were challenged to memorize scriptures, but also he says, "What are you going to do when you're an adult? And someone challenges your faith? What are you going to say? What are you going to do?" And I really realized I did have a faith, even though I had kind of a odd bringing up, just anyway, I took that to heart. And before I went to college, I went to a pre-college class, probably by one of my mentors. I don't even know their names anymore. But the speaker talked about how you need to have your faith as you go. You need to have a faith as you go to college. And so I took that. I still remember that. I still remember the man saying it, and I don't remember his name, but he, I took it to heart. And then I went to the University of Michigan, and in the fall of 1969, and that was quite the deal. It was very tumultuous. There were strikes. There were trashings of the chemistry building where I had my classes. There were people yelling in your face, calling you a scab for going to class. And I was in a dorm where we we had a football come through our window from the boys playing in the courtyard. And of course, the whole dating scene and just wow. I said, and then that culminated in Kent State. That happened the week after I was home. After and that's when I took my friend's invitation to go to a church called a long name, the Organized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and just to see. And there was a group at that point in the Grand Rapids district of Michigan called The Group, and they were young adults that would get together. They would share testimonies, they would sing songs, they would have a brief message from a couple of young ministers. I went to that group once or twice, but there were a lot of baptisms. There were a lot of people that young people that joined the church, some of which are still with the church. I got baptized that summer. The message was so different than what I had encountered before. You talk to ministers in other denominations, and sometimes you get this "I am higher than you" feeling. We had this church had a weird name, but they get up and they were real people. They were mechanics and farmers, and they would get up and talk about how God was real to them, and they would say their own prayers. They wouldn't just always say the Lord's Prayer or the Gloria Patri. They would actually, and it just, okay, I can't say that I really agree with everything they say, but yeah, these people are trying to follow Christ, and I need Christ. And so I joined, and I went back within weeks. I was back in Ann Arbor, and I was the only young person in our congregation. Well, there were teens, there were young kids, but I was the only college student that went to Ann Arbor Congregation. But they, bless their heart, they really, Don and Brenda Parks, who some people might know here, there were others that just took me in. They mothered, they helped me. But so I finished my education, and this is my journey of faith. I got to a point of being quite lonely, and but yet feeling that I didn't see where I could be able to be married and be a physician. And as I progressed through my studies, I kind of had that, I don't know, realization, that fear that I don't know, it was kind of a wistful feeling that I was leaving something behind, but I really didn't think that I was going to get married anyway. And my mother thought that she had some psychotic beliefs that I wasn't very good, that I wasn't going to have, things were going to go wrong for me in motherhood and all that. So there's a kind of fearful thing swirling around with that. And I had some dating misadventures. And then somebody said, "Huh."
That's good. I can hear you.
Somebody, they were, the first man first date, they said, this tells you what I was like. The first dates I had with someone who was not a physician was the man sitting over there. And he told me, he was the best man I ever met. And he's right. And in the swirl of doubt, and it wasn't doubting God, it was a doubt in myself. It was fear. It was, before the second time we were going to go out, I was just, oh, oh, I can't do this. I can't. So I got on my knees and I prayed. I said, Lord, what do you do? What do you do on a date? And the words came to me, you have a good time. And that was really a very unfamiliar concept to me. But I did. And so I'll let him speak for himself next week. Going on, of course, the whole thing I mentioned about the whole apprehension about having children. Wait a second. So where did you meet? In Michigan? No, I was in Chicago. I was training in Chicago. I grew up in Michigan, went to school there, did my residency in suburban Chicago, where I met him. He started to work there. And he might tell you more about that. I don't know.
We met at the end of your residency.
Huh?
And we met at the end of your residency.
Yeah, I was almost done with my residency. I was 28 years old. And then we decided we were going to have children, and I thought, okay. And I had and I got pregnant with Mark when I was first in practice in Oak Park. I had a part-time family practice, holistic health center there. And I had, he came, my pregnancy went well. I had, ate way too many double hot dogs, Chicago dogs. And I had a very long, kind of a long, hard labor, delivery, difficult. And this nearly 9-pound boy comes out. And I remember again praying to God. And I realized after delivering a few babies that when the mother is starting to call on the deity, you better get yourself in time. It's time. She's calling for God. Jesus, you gotta, things are happening. But anyway, but this was after, it was quiet. I didn't scream it, I don't think. And here I have, but the biggest thing is, what am I going to do with a boy? I had sisters. My younger brother probably has been diagnosed with ASD, with autism spectrum disorder. And he was 12 years younger than me. I didn't really grow up around. He didn't grow up around me that much. But anyway, but I didn't know what to do. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Oh. And what am I going to do with a boy? And the words came, I'll be with you. And he was. So, and Jesus and God was. Sort of. So I think I might have done some, and of course Becky, she was completely, she was much easier. She was, thank you, Becky. So that's my journey of faith. So that's having the children. Okay, views of God, that kind of goes with my journey of faith. And it went from just seeing God as being in nature. I would just take by a kid just walking around in fields around my house unsupervised, looking at bugs and frogs and things and just loving. But God was one of judgment. He was one of judgment. You weren't going to measure up. You just weren't going to try as you would. But then as I matured and things happened, I began to read more about Jesus and his life. And I thought, I want to follow this Jesus. I want, and so I did as much as I went into a protracted reading about Jesus thing. And reading my medieval monks and nuns literature and Jesus books and such, but and I ended up at to a personal retreat, and I was practicing, and I just needed to study and kind of get into quiet, and Jim said, go, and so I went to the monastery in Conception Junction, and I had a personal, I think it was a spiritual direction session with, I think Father Adam is his name. I think he's still there. And he said, you know, when you're following Jesus, if you're following him, you're just seeing his back. You don't. And I go, yeah, because he's walking away. I mean, he's walking, he's leaving, and you're following, and you see his back. And yeah, so this is the way it should be. I mean, it's like, Pat, you're in the right direction, just have faith and just, do. So I thought that was a image that has stuck with me. And then I found out later that Jesus, we got into trouble because he would always answer a question with a question. Yeah, and he would, and he'd make you think, and that's so annoying sometimes. And so I learned it, okay, I grappled with that a little bit.
Don has a question.
Oh,
In this period in your life, when you were in residency and in Chicago area, were you in contact with this church?
Yes.
Or with another church?
no, it was with, I attended the first Chicago congregation.
Okay,
And Jim and I were married by an elder, Bud Zach was his name, and a mechanic, and a man of great humility. They didn't. I was so busy, I still was able to do my music now, and do play, and that really helped. But it was, yeah, I did. They probably didn't have the same profound effect on me as the people in Ann Arbor, because I was working every other Sunday and wasn't able to make it to Wednesday evening services. But it was a nice trip by bus, about half an hour away from where I lived, up on Montrose. And I enjoyed going there. So I'm trying to think if there's people that you would know there.
Not Blake Smith.
No,
That
like,
was- No, he was
Way
employed
back.
at that time.
yeah, he was,
He wasn't born yet.
there was an elder, Chuck Skelton, when I was there, who grew up near, I think it was, or he went to Columbia. I think he went to University of Missouri, Columbia, and was active there. And he taught a Sunday school class and was pastor for a while. And we got a young adult group later on with, I remember Denise McIntosh. There was Michael Dahl and his wife, who was sang for the Lyric Opera. So, yeah. But that was later on, after Jim came and showed, when I was my third year there, we had more people that came. Uh-oh.
They went out.
Oh,
Somebody lost.
somebody's communicating.
Connections lost or something, Dad.
They're communicating with comments. You want me to go on?
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
do you remember a man by the name of Kent? He attended some of the Chicago, the Brainerd and First Chicago,
David.
but we lived out in Elgin.
Elgin, okay, that was in the district.
It was in the district.
I
yes.
remember him, I think there was a couple of reunions Jim and I went to. And I'm getting him conflated in my head with a fictional character from Ted Lasso right now. So I don't remember his first name. I think it might have,
I've met him. David Kent was a State Farm insurance agent.
yes,
Yes.
yes,
And he was
okay.
in Elgin.
He was in Elgin, okay. I, like, there were people who were frustrated with me because they wanted me to do things in the district. And they couldn't get a hold of me because I was working.
Busy.
And I was busy, and I was even calling at 10 o'clock at night on a Tuesday. I was at the hospital, you know, so they were, and I thought, sorry. But, so there was, question, what experiences have strengthened your faith? Getting my education, not to be outdone by our fearless leader, Paul, I have brought a couple of pictures. All right, this one, first one, and I'll pass these around if you want.
Yeah.
This is the only picture I have that I like looking at. The only picture. Only picture. I do not fit into the Jones family well, but you know, they're always wanting to take my picture.
And how long was the courtship?
Oh, couple months.
Couple months.
Yeah, we got decided to get
29.
married. We got decided to get married. We met in September 30th, 79, and we got engaged on Thanksgiving.
Wow.
Wow.
We're 20 years old, guys, come on.
Yeah, you knew what you wanted. You knew what you wanted. You knew what we didn't
Yeah.
want. Well, there you go. That too.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was, no, our upbringings are, yeah, our characters, we were both from working class roots. And he had just the right amount of cynicism about the church. Just the right amount. This one is, I'll pass this one around. The other one, this is my medical school picture.
Where are you? Point.
Yeah,
No, you get a free, you get, I don't know, you get an extra cookie if you.
There's Waldo.
Well, you can find, it's an Allard, it is in, alphabetical order, and Ben Carson is up there, upper right. So, yeah, he didn't talk to many people, and he certainly didn't talk to white women. He was very, very focused, very introverted, and we were the first class that they were really intentionally brought in women and minorities. First one, and I would imagine that all of us, I know all of us women had our stories about how we were told that we were taking the place of a deserving young man. What are you going to name your children? Why aren't you making a man happy? You know,
That's by the fact.
that was by the faculty. You know. Michigan is a very, okay, I'm not going to pass this around.
You're leaning out in the front.
Oh, okay.
Oh, up here, up here.
Leaning on the floor.
That is my medical school diploma. It's not going to pass because it's A, heavy, and B is the frame is beginning to break, and I didn't want it to snag somebody. But that is all in Latin, and I was given a translation when we on a piece of paper when we graduated. We were doing a translation of that. It has to do with the University of the Republic of Michigan, and it's signed by all of the professors of the different departments.
There's more signatories there than the Declaration of Independence.
Probably. Michigan is very traditional,
Bigger than.
and it is very, yeah, it's, I think in some ways it's a cult.
I have a question. A lot of times, science and maybe especially medicine ruins people's faith.
Mm.
And have you experienced anything like that?
Well, you have to define faith.
Well, that's
Yeah,
up to
I
you.
mean, if you, one of the first things is my my theory is that we don't know the whole neurology, the whole reality. And that the more I find out about reality, the more complicated it is, the more beautiful it is. The first, when you go and you're a biology major in a Big Ten university, you hear about the theory of evolution, which is sometimes called evolution, I've heard. But to me, that's beautiful. I mean, that we are all, I mean, God has made us out of the stuff of his hands, all of us, the whales, the penguins, the worms, the humans, and we have in common so many things with all life. We're not the only species that actually uses that uses tools. We may do it in a completely different way, but I have no problem with it. Somebody asked me how I could, well, I'm involved with Planned Parenthood. I'll just come out, and they asked me how I could, and I've come with these people. I have found that there are people of faith that are active in that organization, and how can you square that with being a person of Christian faith? And I said, hey, Jesus told the people who were about to stone that woman, if he who is without sin cast the first stone. He stood up for the woman, even though she had maybe made a mistake. Who knows what her story was, but he stood up for her in a loving manner, and of course challenged her to go and sin no more, whatever that meant. No, I don't know what that meant. Yeah, but there's that time and time again, he would talk to women. He revealed himself to a woman, and she was one of, five husbands or whatever the story was with her. I don't, it's not for me to judge, and it is the whole thing with reproduction and life is so complicated and so personal and so emotional. And to me, it has deepened my faith that if you are going to have to stay in a certain faith system and say, it would certainly challenge that. But well, blah, blah, blah.
The reason I ask is, the history of my father. His PhD was in soils, it was science. But he spent almost his entire career in administration of Graceland and the church. President of the Council of 12 even. And yet, a couple of years before he died, I had long conversations with him about how you reckon science and religion. And I thought, I can't believe, Dad, I'm having this conversation with you. Because he had trouble reconciling those two. And I told him, I said, Dad, where do you think truth comes from? Whether it comes through science or it comes through studying of the scripture or psychology or economics or wherever it comes from, it's from God.
Mhm.
And it was like an epiphany for him. I'm going, you're kidding, Dad. So,
Well, the generations before were brought up in very different circumstances. In our recent Antarctic trip, I'd had conversations with geologists, and this one geologist spent time in doing work in Utah, and what he was doing had nothing to do with, looking for fossils and all that kind of thing. But one of the local people said to him, "You don't believe in evolution, do you?" That is still such a matter of faith that this book, the Bible, which was written for a very different purpose, I think, is taken as something it wasn't intended to be. But in my thought, I don't know where, I know where my stepmother might be. She's 97, married my dad after my mother left. But she, yeah, she still has her beliefs that, you know, that we're scientists are playing God and, you know, and that kind of things. Did you have other questions? Well,
Pat?
that's-
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah,
Can you
yes,
hear me?
yes.
Okay. I was wondering if you, can you hear my question? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
I was wondering if you would address a little bit about how music has had a relationship with your success as a medical doctor and also in your faith journey.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that goes under experience that have kept me active in the church.
You go.
Segue. Okay, I mentioned about wanting to play. Music is how I pray. I really, it's a whole body thing. As I'm playing the piano or playing the flute, I'm feeling my movements and it calms me. I don't know if it really directly, I'd have to put some thought into it, if it really affected the way I practice medicine. I do know that when things got really very tense and upset when I was in medical school and residency, that I would get up to the church because I didn't have my own piano, and I would journey to the church and I'd play piano for a while in an empty church, and I'd always feel better. So maybe keeping me sane. And I still enjoy playing for services, but I'm not much of a performer. I don't see myself as performing. But does that, yeah,
One of the things when you were the doctor at the college,
yeah.
well,
I think of being at the sidelines of the football games, you know, big with child.
one of the things that Tom Powell, it changed, I think it changed his life, honestly. But when you got called out to the units because a young woman was basically dead,
Yeah, yeah.
and he was there, and he said he witnessed you bringing her back to life.
Oh, my.
And it had such an impact on him, and how wonderful it is to have that kind of ability to assist someone who's in such dire circumstances. And I'm sure you've had that experience other times.
You've seen, it was you and Kay, right? You and Kay, Kay Blair, you and Kay Blair.
Yeah, we went
Oh,
out to, yeah.
okay, he never mentioned KB in there, but yeah, how
Well,
that impacted
well,
him, and I know it
well-
impacted her.
Well,
I mean,
that is, she was going through a respiratory arrest.
right.
She had severe asthma, and at that time, probably, this was an unfortunate place for her to be living.
Yeah.
And we knew she was getting sick. We basically did CPR and we got her oxygen.
Mhm.
And because she's otherwise a kind of a strong, healthy young woman, she came back, and but I'm sure any paramedic that it would have to be, it wouldn't be an MD that had to do that.
But still,
oh,
it's the ability to be able to minister in that way. And I'm sure you've had many experiences
There is-
like that when you brought people to life, and then
Yeah, yeah,
newborns, whether they're babies or other people, and then seeing them on the way out.
yeah.
You've done both.
Well, I remember, I mean, and usually the things that are most dramatic in my life are the simplest. I remember a baby that I just delivered when I was a resident, and the baby had aspirated its own poo, a meconium, and it was really the thick, pluggy kind of stuff. And I remember just putting down a tracheal, looking at the airway with a trachea and sucking it out, and the baby and the little boy did well. Do not remember the name. After a while, it kind of blurs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
so there's that. That one was that was a very dramatic moment. And The other one, though, that the other side is when there was a baby that was killed by the mother. That was that was hard. And it affected all of us that were involved with that. And that was shortly after. That goes under what are things that have helped me go through the trying times. So, well, I've got a couple minutes if there's, how do you live out your faith in a way that exemplifies God's love toward us and would encourage others to seek God? And these are some of my weird behaviors. And based on a Sunday school book, a book called Streams of Living Water by Richard Foster. And there is the stream of living water called the incarnational faith, or seeing God in life, in things that are around you, and using your body to your mind, your soul to glorify God. And I've talked about music, and it really is an important way I communicate with God. And walking, I walk. I don't like to have a lot of cars. I will walk as long as I can. The experience that got me that is I was late in my years of practice, and I was just getting exhausted. The call schedule will do it to you. But also my mother had died. She died a week before Becky's wedding, first wedding. Jim and I helped with that. There were just things that weighed on my soul, and I was just fatigued. And I remember one Sunday afternoon, it was beautiful. It was a sunny day like today. And I just took a long nap. I was so tired. And I remember looking out, I said, God, I should exercise. I should exercise, and I just can't. And I had another one of those kind of words that came to me, experiences. Well, you'll do this when you can, and that's okay. And so, okay, so now it's the time I can do it, so I can. And so I do it. And but it just so there's that. So I walk, and then another thing came to me, is that Jesus was inviting me to come out and play. I didn't have much time for play as I was a kid. Or as an adult, I wouldn't give myself time to play, except with Mr. Best Man of My Life guy. So there is just come out and play. Music I've talked about already. Use of our money and substance. Where do I put it in? What do I give my money to? And I'm so blessed, so and then there's the knitting thing, which is a DNA thing with me, but I'm a compulsive knitter, and thank you, great grandma Mina, but I do it because I'm kind of the boss of my knitting. I can bend that thread the way I want to, sort of, and no one can tell me how to do that. And I like to do it, and it's Paul Davis's fault. He asked somebody around here, what did you do as a 12-year-old that would make people, that you could help people with? I said, well, I learned how to knit when I was about 12. And so I would have knit a scarf for Paul Davis. So random gifts,
Store.
Yeah, not just any-
Baltimore Ravens.
I don't.
Yeah, it's a Baltimore. I researched what might be, and I got research. I researched it. What can I do to really really be mischievous here. But I've made a couple of DNA scarves for people. I'm making a pair of socks for my brother-in-law that have a secret message in Morse code on them. But so with that light thing, that's
It is
wonderful.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing.
All right.